we're going to go ahead and get started off with today's session with some housekeeping slides I'd like to share just to get us all set and engaged for this morning's session. Again, this is our session number 8, focused on youth voice from curiosity to change, youth advocacy through storytelling and student voice. We have a great presenter today from an excellent organization ready to share some best practices. And I actually have an idea and an activity that will engage each of you right at the end of this session if you're interested. So just hold tight for that information. Now, before we get started on today's session, what I'd like to share is an upcoming deadline in regards to an opportunity for our youth here in Pennsylvania, and actually all the youth across the country. So the Mott Foundation is celebrating their 100-year anniversary this year. And to part of that celebration, they'd like to invite a number of families from each state up to Flint, Michigan to celebrate what they call here the Youth Pitch or the Mott $1 Million Challenge. Now, I'm not going to get into a lot of the information as you will have access to this when you get on here or when you log on. But what I do want to press here is that it's not a high level cameras, lighting, props, all that. We really want to hear, and they want to hear from the youth in their authenticity. So encourage them to do this 30 to 90-second pitch on a challenge that they see in their neighborhood, so they can do it from the playground. A challenge that they see within their school, so they can do it within the gymnasium, or a challenge in the after-school program or their community, or should I say a challenge in our community that they can do in the after school program. So I'm going to drop this link in the chat, and I encourage us here in Pennsylvania, and I'll say this with all sincerity and encouragement. Let's step up PA and get our young people involved in this challenge. Everyone, that means every student that submits a video will receive an award or an incentive. It's $1 million that they put aside for the youth. So let's take advantage of it, people. And with that being said, I'll stop sharing the Mott Challenge and go into our presentation for today. All right, so I'm happy to introduce our presenter today, Kaylee McGuigan. She's an education program coordinator at Penn Education. Kaylee is an educator and youth advocacy leader dedicated to amplifying student voice through inquiry, media, and community-centered learning. A graduate of Shippensburg University, that's alumni, yay, yay, with a degree in elementary education, Kaylee began her career as a classroom teacher, designing project-based learning experiences that empower students to explore issues they care about and share their perspectives beyond the classroom. That's exactly what we're asking you to do in that Mott Pitch Challenge, and this is a great information session for you to get some more ideas in doing that. Kaylee, now serving as a secondary education program coordinator, develops STEM and inquiry-driven programming for grades 4 to 8 and leads initiatives that connect students with families, educators, and local partners. Her work centers on helping young people identify their strengths, engage critically with the world around them, and see themselves as active contributors to their communities. She believes meaningful youth advocacy begins with adults creating the space, trusts youth voices, and provides students with tools to tell their own stories. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Kaylee for this morning's presentation. And why don't we go ahead and practice some of our reaction on the button and welcome Kaylee to this space right now, please.
Thank you, guys. I'm so excited to be here. I'm going to take a second to share my screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yes.
Well, yeah. Okay, perfect. Sorry, I'm just in a little bubble down here, so holler if you need me. But I'm so excited to be here today. I know time is a luxury these days, so the fact that you're spending this hour with me and listening to what I have to say, I'm just so excited. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Kaylee McGuigan, and I work for Penn Education as the secondary education program coordinator. And while that's a mouthful, and there is a million things I feel like that I do within the pen and wheelhouse, all of us have so many big ideas and so many projects and things that we're working on. The most relevant to today is something that I've adopted, formed. It's truly like my baby, the youth voice imperative. And we'll get into that deeper, but essentially, I think it meets the meaning that we're all here for, and that's rising youth voices. Before Penn and Education, I taught kindergarten and fourth grade. And fourth grade was a big eye opener for me in terms of elevating youth voice. I think that's when the questions kind of start coming. And that was a lot to adapt to from kindergarten. And in the community, I cheered at Cumberland Valley my entire life. So I coached there through college. And teaching at Susquehanna last year, I decided to start coaching their high school cheer team. So a lot of different facets. I'm one that wears all the hats all the time. I kind of love it. But I'm here and I'm excited to talk about youth advocacy through storytelling and student voice. So, this session is really about how youth voice and curiosity and the authentic, like the real storytelling, can combine to create that real impact within the student lives, within the school, within the community, the program. So, I'll be talking about different frameworks that we found successful, real world examples, and strategies that you can bring back to either your classroom or program. And I mentioned to you guys that I taught fourth grade, and it opened my eyes a lot. And in fourth grade, we had a lot of real world conversations because I recognized that they didn't know how. They didn't know how to respond to open ended questions. They didn't really know how to do things for themselves without me saying that's where the pencil bin is. But on day 160 of school, I can't say that anymore. And I realized we really just have to listen to them. So I created these conversations and we talked about, anything and everything and honoring those little questions. But in terms of this story, there was a student who said, Miss M, you listened so much to us. Thank you. And I was like, yeah, of course, it's what I'm here for. And he said, why do adults talk about us, but not with us? And I think that's really where the drive started to come in, where, oh my gosh, these students' voices matter way more than my own. They matter more than anything going on here because they're the ones that have to participate. They're the ones that are going to be involved in the community and leaving that impact and carrying whatever framework or scaffolding you provide for them. And we're not letting them be a part of it. So it's learning how to foster those meaningful conversations together. And I've kind of noticed that within Youth Voice, my time in the classroom, my time in college, my time being in other schools, my time here, that there seems to be kind of three different spectrums, I call them, of Youth Voice. And it's not to say that each in their own has their own pros and their own cons, but really narrowing down what you want to establish in your program or your classroom, I think is going to be the most helpful because if you don't, it ends up being chaotic and inviting chaos into storytelling with students when they don't know where to start, what to do, it doesn't end well for anybody. So think about in what context do you want to develop where your youth voice sits or where it sits right now. Is it decorative? Is it something on the walls or a website, but it's not necessarily shaping decisions? And by that, I don't necessarily mean handing a student, a prompt that says, how can we end world hunger? Because that's a big challenge. But I mean more so like those creative teams that are really there to, brighten up the hallways or make those murals kind of thing. Is your youth voice spectrum, is it more consulted where students' opinions are occasionally heard but don't impact outcomes? And while this sounds negative, an immediate example I can think of is my roommate right now is working with her high school for the school musical. And the school musical that they're doing has a lot of copyright kind of things, right? So although the student voices are heard and sometimes, instructions are taken or feedback is taken, it does have to be consulted not only with, their program teacher, but also that copyright of what they can and can't do. And the last one, the one that I focused on within the youth voice imperative that we have here at Penn and Education is, and I would say in my time as a classroom, is collaborative. Students are shaping product or projects alongside of you. Are they telling you things that they think would work? Are they taking what you have scaffolded for them and maybe making it easier for them, for their understanding, for their specific topic kind of thing. So really, it's not a critique. And it, to me, again, I think every spectrum that I've observed of youth voice, I think is important to its own. But what do you want to accomplish within your program and within your setting? So I broke today down by different parts to help you understand, to help me understand, but truly they are really interwoven. So part one is the umbrella, right? So I work for Penn and Education. And in Penn and Education is a program that we have or a platform called the Youth Voice Imperative. Okay. So I like to call this the umbrella. I really like to say the rainbow because it just sounds more cute and fun. But Youth Voice Imperative really is that platform, right? I like to go deeper than that because I am very, very passionate about this to say that it's truly it's the belief system. It's almost that foundation, the idea that students are not participants, they're contributors to every single thing that we do. So everything that I'm sharing today fits under this umbrella, this initiative. And if you don't have the reason why or the mission, if you don't believe in the principle first, then any activity or framework is going to fall flat of that because then really you're asking, well, what are we doing? Every kind of event or plan or project or program you go to coordinate, it always comes back to, well, why? Well, why are we doing this? And we should be able to answer that as facilitators. So I think within the youth voice, and I think to carry on with your programs or what you're creating, there's four pillars or frameworks that I really think about that stand true to my heart that I will not back down from. And that's the core mission. And the first one being that it's centered and not scripted. So when youth voice is centered, the students generate the questions. We're not handing them a worksheet and expecting, the right answer to come out of it. Instead, we're asking, what do you want to understand? And our role is to design the conditions and provide those scaffolds and support inquiry, but we're not going to script it. So, of course, there is a time and place for everything, right? We can't just always go, free will, do what you want. Here's an iPad, record what you want about it, because that doesn't end up working well for anybody. And it ends up causing a lot of gaps. So what we found successful in one program that we're running right now that I will get into, again, I said this kind of interweaves a lot. We're working with a high school on an America 250 project. So for that, the high schoolers developed a list of 50 questions in different topics relating to America 250 and celebrating America's 250th birthday. And they are mentoring fourth graders. So they created a list together of 50 questions to give to fourth graders, but there was only 22 fourth graders. So the fourth graders got to navigate which topic they wanted, and they got to navigate through this long list of questions. So I don't want to say you can't script it at all because there definitely needs to be order, but you can't just hand them something because that takes all of the ownership right out of it. And of course, guiding them through that process is going to be key here. And I'll get into that in my next slide a little bit with a very funny example. So the next one is critical and not compliant. And I think I hear at least a lot of similarities in different aspects of teaching where it's really hard to get them to do, to think, to want to learn, to want to dive deeper, to pick up the pencil sometimes. And our job is not to force them to do that, but it's how do we make them feel heard? How do we make them feel comfortable enough to even share the slightest bit of thought so we can frame that question? And before I get into that, that critical thinking piece, I think, goes hand in hand with media literacy. And that's really within this critical piece of the framework, media literacy is the core to it because nowadays information is just coming in. Students are laughing at things. They don't know if it's true. Students are reposting things and they don't know if it's true. And with all of these videos, this technology coming out, they don't even know what they're looking at. They don't know what's happening. And then we have this other side of them where they don't have the tools to critically think. They don't have the tools to analyze this media. So within that, you're giving them the tools to analyze media critically. You're looking at, who created this? Who benefits? Who is missing from this story? Why did this person make this story? Why as youth, why are we good representation for this story? So if we teach students to simply comply, to simply just go with the first article that they found, they miss that power of questioning systems, narratives, and assumptions, and critical thinking paired with voice. It leads to that meaningful change. And with this, I always think of that one student. When I went in and did this America 250 lesson, there was this one student, this one fourth grader. He wasn't misbehaving or anything, but I could just tell like he was my challenge. He did not want to do it. He did not want to pick up his pencil. He didn't want to be in school. I'm not his teacher. I don't know what was going on, but I knew I wanted to flip the script for him. I wanted him to be excited and invested in this project because he chose his topic after all. So I went up to him and I asked him and I said, you know, what what's your topic? And he said, it's Ben Franklin. And I said, okay, what about Ben Franklin? He goes, well, I already know the answer. He made electricity with the kite. Said, okay. And I said, do you think anyone did it before him? And he goes, well, I don't know. I said, okay, Google it. So he Googles it. And it turns out that there was this man that actually did attempts before, and he ended up passing away because ball lightning struck and killed him. I have never heard of ball lightning in my life, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It's an orb of lightning, and it's terrifying. And this kid, I mean, it switched for him immediately. He was so intrigued by the ball lightning. It kind of reminded him of Stranger Things. So it's all about one, analyzing that media critically so they understand that it's honest, it's truthful, it's benefiting the right people. They know who is creating it, but also framing it so it doesn't run dry. Yes, you can ask them a question, they can Google it and they can answer it, but what else? What's next? What gets them invested to even raise their voice in the first place? The third one I have is connected community engagement. So within that, I'm very lucky. The high school that I partnered with is absolutely amazing. And the teacher that I have there has just an amazing sense of classroom community. And I'm so lucky that every classroom I've joined has been that way. And I think it really starts there, having that community, or if it's that program, creating that community when they come in to know that it's okay to ask questions and it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to make mistakes. And you might think that they know that, but I think in order to really make youth voice take off, it's really honoring that. It's letting them know that you hear them, that you see them, that what they're doing is great, or what they're doing is going to lead them here. They need to hear that. And I'm lucky that they had that kind of environment already there because it really made myself easy to plug myself in. But when the student feels safe in the classroom, and then the student feels safe within this program, we can then open it up and open their mind to go to real audiences. And the stake in the learning change when first they feel safe and then they open their mind to the possibility, to the, okay, I can tell my voice, I can use my voice, I can share my message, but what can I do with it? And ownership increases, identity as a contributor really forms, and students end up taking themselves more seriously. Adults, I think, also begin to listen differently. I am one that loves to have big ideas and do a lot of things. And many times last year, my team kind of was skeptical, but it always ends up working out because when you have that relationship and you're involved with everybody involved, the teachers and the students, everybody wants it to succeed. And then the last pillar that I really have for youth voice that should be centered and that framework is the co-constructed learning. So again, using that guidance to help them. And it's really about shared power. They help shape processes, students decide different approaches, and sometimes even guide the outcomes. So for example, I created this platform, this curriculum, this foundation of our program. And the students realized when I made this graphic organizer, it's great. It serves its purpose. But to help their fourth grade students better, they thought some of the wording and some of the question styles could be adapted to fit the America 250 lesson better. And I could have sat there and I could have been offended, but they didn't change everything. I made the framework. I am confident that it's rigorous, that it is appropriate. All they did was just change it to scaffold their partner better. And it's all about that that process happening organically. You know what I mean? So within that, it's not chaos. When you have that community, when you have those people there that are invested, that want this project or whatever program they're working on to do well, it ends up just adults are guiding, they're supporting, they're protecting the structure, but the students end up leading exactly where it matters. And sometimes it's about taking that risk. So those are the pillars, and those are the four, really the framework that when creating the engine, which I'll get into, when creating this next piece, I really wanted to make sure whatever program, whatever event, whatever it was, the youth voice imperative, how I'm raising the youth voice, these are the principles that it follows. Because again, without principles, without the foundation, it always comes back to why. So once we got the why, your program or your event or whatever you are doing to raise the youth voice, it needs some sort of engine, right? Something needs to make it happen. Something needs to make it go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience now, and the engine that we have here is Curiosity Curators. So that's the title of that podcast style that we've been working on with that high school, but really finding something that sticks. What do students want to talk about? You know, what is your program based on? What is your standard that you are covering that you want to do some sort of youth voice aspect with inside of it? What is the engine? What's going to power it through? Because if youth voice is the imperative, how can we make it happen? So with Curiosity Curators, it starts with one idea, and curiosity is not a distraction from learning. It is the engine. I think we can all relate as educators. You know, you have that student on the carpet or in their desk in the back and asking a question that kind of sounds maybe ridiculous, or maybe it's just me because I taught kindergarten, but just a question kind of out of left field. And we can look at that as an opportunity of, you know, disarraying or dismantling the conversation at hand. But sometimes you can take that upper hand and guide that and prompt that into a curious question. How can we dig deeper? How can the rest of my students benefit from this within the capacity where we can continue to learn? So, for example, I had a student while we were learning social studies last year, he wanted to learn about the Revolutionary War. Well, we weren't covering that at the time. So we took time out of recess. I had an eighth grade teacher, social studies teacher, come down and learn with him. So it's about taking the moments where you can to answer those questions and not treating it as a distraction or just turning them down when they're asking these questions, because to them, it makes sense. And we might not have the time right then and there, but to follow up with that student is important to honor that youth voice process. Students ask, they research, they analyze, they create, and then it ends up leading into advocacy. We just learn to scaffold, guide, and support the process. So we really wanted to use curiosity as fuel when we were creating this, because I like to say that I know a lot about nothing. I know a lot of oddball facts. I ask a lot of weird questions that maybe aren't necessarily questions you would ask all the time. But it was generally because I didn't know. Like, for example, why do cats purr? Or why, and that's just an example. Or why is the European starling invasive in the United States? Or why do we even have bullfrogs here? You know, it's just questions like that where it's like, okay, or why did the Liberty Bell crack? And in those, it's where we're all sitting in a room and I bring these questions up and nobody knows the actual answer. We just kind of go about our life and we don't ever really exercise, you know, the power of Google, the power of, you know, books and media that we consume to find out the answer. And using this curiosity as fuel, I think gives students the space to wonder. They ask questions that we never would. And sometimes they're small and oddly specific, like the ones I mentioned, but they end up having these ripple effects. The questions require the research and the critical thinking and connection to larger systems, and also that collaboration piece. If you're finding out a fun fact, the first thing I'm doing is going and telling my friend because I think it's awesome that I found that. And I noticed within my classroom when we're practicing those things and you kind of hit them with that shocker or that oh wow fact, that's when they kind of invest into it. So once we use that as fuel, I almost developed kind of like a pipeline from curiosity to advocacy. If I'm being completely honest, I'm not saying it doesn't work. It's just not my style. And in forms of talking to youth that I've mentored through cheerleading and other things, the big thing is they do not want to be looked at and say, solve world hunger. Why is there so much litter in our school parking lot? Why do we recycle here and not here in our school? While I think those are important topics, and while I think that if there is a student that steps up and wants to do it, that we cover it, absolutely. But those students, that's not what they want first. What can we ask to get them there, right? What can we do? So I would say within the pipeline, there's curiosity, there's inquiry, there's that media literacy piece, collaboration, production, public storytelling, and then that civic impact. Each step builds the next, and the teacher's role is to guide and not control. When the student takes that ownership, that's when the magic happens. When they finally feel like, hey, I'm going to try this. Hey, I'm going to do this. And they put that leader hat on, and it might take you prompting them. That's when the magic happens because they want to know how they can make a difference. When they're invested, they just spent all this time, all this research, and they're invested because they want to learn. I'm not making them, I'm not forcing them because they are curious. They don't know how it works. They don't know what to do. And in turn, it's asking the question of who can benefit from this? How can we help people with this? What do people need to know? What is the main message here? So I think guiding them through that questioning process first will lead to that advocacy piece that ultimately I think is important from the youth voice perspective, but also giving them the chance as youth voices to just be youth voices. Let them create, and the advocacy piece will come. And I touched on media literacy also before, but within Curiosity Curators, we really strive, especially in today's information age, that students need to start to analyze the media very, very critically. Again, it's asking that who created this, who benefits, who's missing. They need to understand what a credible source is, what a credible source is not. Okay. Who actually wrote this? What is their audience? When you foster the environment where media literacy is the expectation, where showing evidence is what I called it in fourth grade, or finding your evidence is the expectation, students are going to start to take it upon themselves to continue to dive deeper into the research because they have the tools and the skills. They know how to research. They know what to look for. They know how to read a bias. They know how to cite the source. Within that, we're giving them these skills so that way they are critical thinkers within their environment and they can back up their claims. Because already what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is, and back to my original quote, is why don't adults listen to us? Why are people not listening to us? Or they don't want to create because it's like, who's going to listen anyway? Being open and honest and showing them how to create that audience that you want to bring in with the type of media that you put out is going to be so effective for the overall collaboration, the production, and also it definitely makes publication hard if they're spewing out facts that are not correct. So the next piece we focus on with Curiosity Curators is the production. And the production really just makes that thinking made visible. When students produce something like podcasts or videos or those digital stories, they're thinking aloud, they're thinking in public, and it's not just an output. It shows them reflection, precision, and creativity. And I think for a lot of us, we sit here and we say we're not creative. We sit here and we say we're not talented. We sit here and we say this. And I think, again, fourth grade opened my eyes as I feel like they started to really become critics of themselves. And when we started to do things where we were publishing them at the very end, or an event that we had here where we researched Pennsylvania historical women, and to the publication process, you can see just that light where they put all of their work that they curated, and now it's in this digital space, and they get to share that. People get to watch that. That's something, a memory that they keep forever. So the production piece, it gives them a deeper reflection, I think, of themselves, and it gives them more buy-in, more investment. Why am I creating this in the first place? Why am I sharing this message? Who am I even going to talk to? Right? It gives them that ownership of what they can produce within guidelines, of course, and who they want to share it to. And now, my favorite part, and what I said we would go back to of Curiosity Curators, is the power of specific questions. And I think this can go within any type of inquiry-based youth voice framework, is how can we get them hooked, right? Especially when we talk about that high school grade band. Like it's difficult. There's so many things that they're involved with. There's so many things that they want to do, they need to do, that it's hard to get them out to some of these after school programs. And it's hard sometimes to feel that reach as a program coordinator versus being in the classroom. So I'm trying to find any little thing that will get these students wanting to collaborate with each other, wanting to talk with each other, wanting to just have a space to create and kind of let go. So when I started thinking of this, and when I started thinking of I know a lot about nothing, so to speak, um, it was, how do we get this out to the audience? How do we curate this to where it's not just completely chaotic free will, but we also have some sort of guidance that doesn't kill the autonomy, right? So it really started. Here are some questions that maybe we would cover within Curiosity Curators. So, how did the California gold rush impact bullfrog populations? Why are European starlings invasive because of Shakespeare? And how did rabbits reshape Australia? Now, to me, those questions are broad. Those questions are exciting. And the first one was really another powerful moment that got this kicked off. I was working on a fifth grade lesson plan, and it was about the California Gold Rush. And I had a book about a student who went to a river, and she went down there for a class project. She comes home, tells her older brother about it. Her older brother says, "Did you see all the frogs?" And she was like, "No, what are you talking about?" But I wanted to do about the California Gold Rush. So it was like, okay, how do frogs connect to the California Gold Rush? I Googled it. I had no idea. I really didn't know. And it turns out that the miners were eating all of the native frogs in California, and we were losing them due to deforestation with the mining going on. So they decided to import bullfrogs. When they did so, they did it because they were bigger. So they were hoping that they would have more meat, because at the time when they were eating the native frogs, it equated to like they were eating 250 a day, something crazy. And they imported them. They were definitely bigger and they were way more aggressive. They reproduced way quicker, and they were eating all of the native frogs that were left anyway. And we could not get rid of them during that California gold rush time. And so they ended up expanding throughout the United States. And that to me is the power of specific questions, because I would have never known that. The ball lightning thing, he would have never known that. So that is really the driving force of what Curiosity Curators is, and how we raise youth voice within the youth voice imperative, is focusing on those specific questions that end up having those ripple effects. And like I said, we did America 250 with the high school within the same structure and platform. And we focused on science topics, art topics, sports topics. There's questions about slinkies and Jeeps. So I really think that honoring the curiosity of these students is going to make these options like limitless. Now, we got through the framework, and we got through what we do for Curiosity Curators, but the next is the proof. So where are you going to bring your program? What are you going to do with your classroom? What are you going to do? What's the next step? You have your idea. You know what your engine is. You know what you want to do. You know how you want to raise the youth voice. What's next? I found the most success was in strong partners and relationships. So when we started this and I came on board, there was a partnering school that wanted to be involved in our youth voice study or youth voice imperative. And they wanted to elevate their school news program. And this was from grades 3 to 6. And what really stood out to me was they didn't want polished scripts and they didn't want me to go in there and tell them what to do completely. They wanted authentic student perspectives, right? So they covered amazing stories. They covered big brothers, big sisters. They covered their new basketball team within their school. They've never had a sports team before, so this was a big announcement for them. They covered a success coach that they have at their school that came from China. So they interviewed him about his education in China and his education in America. And then they also covered their local pizza shop because everybody goes there. They got to go behind the counter. They got to get free pizza. And it was a really rewarding experience because those topics mattered to them. Those interviews mattered to them. And that was the first example to me of youth voice truly in action. And relationships just move that vision forward. As my time at Chatter News finished when the program was over, I tell them so many times. I just saw one of them at Chick-fil-A the other day, and she came over and said hi. And they continue to grow no matter what direction the youth voice imperative goes. I always know that those Chatter News kids are always looking for the next thing and always looking for the next opportunity. So how can we go back and how can we assist them in that? And with my coaching, one of my cheerleaders is actually on my team and on the media team for high school. And that's how I got connected for our America 250 lessons. So whether it's your best teaching buddy or somebody in your community that can help you, those relationships are what move everything forward. Because again, it's cultivating that trust, it's honoring their voices. And if there is no relationship with the students, with the people you're working with, and again, that's something, that comes with time, but you're not going to have that foundation. And ultimately, that environment is so crucial, I think, at this time. These students need these relationships. They need to be heard. They need to be seen at this time. And the bond just became the blueprint. I mean, from the experience so far working with the high school and the America 250 lessons, I feel like this thing has kind of spiraled out of control in such a good way where we want to do this and this and this next, and they want to cover this, and we're invited here to talk about this. And those are the opportunities that we're finding for the students, that the students are finding for themselves, that we are taking everything that we can to build this bond, to show them that what they're doing matters. And I think that gets lost sometimes. And I think, we get so into the glitz and glamour of we need to create this big project. We need to answer this big question. We need to solve this big problem. And we forget that at the end of this day, what I started with, it comes back to listening to and honoring the youth voices around us. It also brings great leadership, and coming from somebody who taught kindergarten and fourth and going and seeing high schoolers in action besides, a cheerleading practice or something of that nature, it has been absolutely amazing. I mean, even with the younger kids, the 3 to 6, but just the amount of ownership that they've truly taken. And I'm not surprised in a way where I'm like, oh my gosh, they actually did something. I'm surprised in oh my gosh, like I think we created something awesome here. And it's just that when they finally take that ownership, when they have that leadership, they started to ask better questions. They cared more, they collaborated more deeply. So like I said, I had no intention of them revising the research guide that I provided for them at all. They took it upon themselves, right, to develop something that they thought would help the fourth graders, their mentees, a little bit better. After all of our Chatter News videos got done, they submitted a 988 suicide prevention video. And when they did that, after publishing the rest of their videos, the ownership of the sixth graders, who we called the student leaders, were just amazing. They wrote the scripts, they told people where to go and what to do, and they were just so efficient. And watching that leadership, and again, honoring that leadership, it's, hey, you did a good job, or hey, don't worry about it, like shake it off. And it's that constant line of communication of the expectation and also just trusting them. I have a very hard time of finally letting go and letting them kind of, fly and do their thing, but let them be the leader that they want to be. Now, I feel like I've given lots of tips and tricks and our frameworks, and certainly please take any and all the information I said today. But how to actually build this in your space, I think would be a great start is having a curiosity launch. So I'm sure many of you have done this before, but I find it very successful. I think when you're working in a classroom setting, especially, what are you curious about? What do you know? What do you not know? Write it on a sticky note, put it in the board. And for my students last year, I challenged them. Some of them didn't want to do it, and that was not an option. Some of them said, I don't know. And my answer was, okay, well, what do you know? And we would keep going from there. Sometimes it was a lesson of, okay, I have 5 minutes on the clock. And after 2 minutes, they're done and they don't know what to do. And it's, okay, let's write more questions. To things like that to us is like, okay, this is how I'm a productive adult. This is how I'm a productive human. But sometimes even fourth graders, even high schoolers, they need that reminder. It's okay to be bored. It's okay to sit. It's okay to ask more questions. It's okay to dig deeper. Okay. But starting with a curiosity launch where they can ask their questions, and you can go about this many ways. You can group them up however you'd like. You can have them read them aloud, but some way having them take the ownership of what they asked. And if you're not moving on with their question, maybe even having, a space where it's like, we'll revisit later, honoring their question always, or prompting it back to the original. So that way they feel honored and they feel safe and successful. Now, we haven't called it this, but I loved this little saying, inquiry incubator. So that would come next. And while we do this, we've never used this term, and I'm definitely going to start to use it. But it's basically just a place that fosters student interest and is through collaborative peer review. So we did a lot of this, I would say, when they were first collaborating on that research organizer and then bringing it back down to the high school, because one student noticed that he thought that the research organizer could just serve the student a little bit better. And that's completely fair. And then it kind of turned into a whole class thing where they decided to develop it together. Hey, I like this. Hey, I don't like this. Hey, we should do this. Hey, we shouldn't do this. And within that, they had an open mind. And when we went down to fourth grade, we shared that experience. We shared, the trials and the tribulations. That way, when researching got hard for the fourth graders, guess what? They knew that we were going to be there because we went through that hard too. And that's fine. We're all in this together. But learning that collaboration piece when it is so vital right now to teach these kids how to collaborate is so important. Even if it's a day of let's think out loud, let's draw it out, and make sure we're being very, very explicit when we do it. We're not just sitting around. We're right. Our pens are on the paper. Our pencils are on the paper. We're drawing this. We're storyboarding this. But a place where students can really collaborate and hear each other out, because I think sometimes they lack that. And then creating some sort of storytelling studio. Now, for us, it's creating that space, and it might not always be a regular studio, like a specific room, but creating that space almost like I like to compare it to like a calm corner, right? In a classroom where it's just the students, they know when they're in this space that, it's their time to record, it's their time to create, it's their time to build, whatever it may be. And you know what? It might just be a sign on or some writing on a construction paper and the materials that you have, and that's fine. But making it a space that feels special to them will allow them to recognize that all the time that they invested, people are investing back into them. They want them to succeed. And even if it's not the most big and, ordeal of, things, it doesn't have to be, because this person is investing in you. And I think reminding them within this storytelling studio, like, hey, we are in the storytelling studio, whether it's, again, a big room or a piece of construction paper. We're in the storytelling studio. Like, you are a creator. You are here to raise the voices of the youth, you're here to share this message. What can we do? And again, that helps the responsibility, the structuring and the sharing of the narratives and their authenticity as creators. And then becoming that advocacy amplifier for them. So what can you be doing in the background? You know, who can we share this with? So for example, for America 250, we'll be sharing it at a local America 250 celebration within a county, and they're going to be able to do a live podcast. Before this teacher has released books on Apple Books. Things of that nature. What can you do? Can you post it on YouTube? Can you post it on SoundCloud? Can your school repost it? Can you guys make a social media for your program? What can you do? Can you write a letter? What can they say at the end of this that makes them feel empowered to do it all over again? So, as I'm wrapping up, I invite any and all of you to reach out. I will have my contact information and really continue to just think about how can we keep students curious? How can we keep students collaborating? How can we keep students being critical thinkers? Because at the end of the day, no matter what subject you teach, what grade band you teach, that's what we need. And within that, I think youth voice becomes limitless. There will be kids of every interest, of every grade, being able to talk about and disseminate different media across the world. At least that's my hope and that's my dream and that's my vision. But I want you to leave thinking this: where could curiosity lead instead of follow in your classroom or community? So think about one idea you might have, one risk that might be associated with it, and think about any students you're thinking, any student voices you're thinking about. Maybe it's students that are always asking that one question. Maybe it's somebody that you just haven't heard enough from. I think youth advocacy doesn't necessarily begin with a platform. It begins with a question. And that's a question that we choose not to silence. So I know that was a lot of things and a lot of framework. I think it really, at the end of the day, comes down to making your student feel heard and safe and seen, and developing something, a platform that we can scaffold to provide the youth with the experiences and the resources to continue to develop their growth and their sharing online. But that is all I have today. Thank you all for sitting with me, for taking the time out of your day to do so. I appreciate it. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Kaylee. Let's show our appreciation for the information shared today by Kaylee. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty excited. I want to run out and be around some young people right now and start asking some questions. So thank you very much. Very enlightening, very informational session. We are greatly appreciative of that. Were there any questions right now? I think I've seen a question in the chat of how did the rabbits change or reshape Australia? Does anybody know that one? I know I want to go figure that one out. But any questions? Anyone want to drop anything in the chat or unmute yourselves?
I have a I don't know if it's a question or some advice. So I've been working, I am a parent as a family advocate partner, but I also is using the children. So I just started doing those non-PDs, and one of them was like I think I'm on the right track. That's what I'm trying to see if I was on the right track, because our kids is saying like it's boring, it's nothing. So I told them about leadership, get into your student government, and it's a start there. So I came up with a 1-day conference for the student governments and whoever wants to participate. And it's a whole day about leadership, because I think that's where to start, because when I ask them what is leadership, the answer is crazy. So I wanted to know, like, I'm doing that with working with the parents and saying, what is your leadership style, or what do you want to when our kids is in school or in some kind of program. So I'm working on both sides. And it's like they saying the same thing, but in a different kind of language. If it's, but they don't think so. So I'm here to like, you are saying the same thing, but it's in a different language. And I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes complete sense. And I think that piece of it is hard, right? It's like how do we make them care, right? How do we get these people here? But I think the truth of it is, at least from my perspective and kind of formulating this, is that the kids that do care, they will show up. They will be there. And it sounds what you're creating is something, an opportunity for these kids. And sometimes that conversation is, you know what? And I've had to have this conversation with a couple of these kids trying to get them to, my own events. I get it, but it's, what do you want to do? And if it's, whatever they want to do under the sun, okay, this leadership summit, I'm giving you this opportunity. This is a great place to do X, Y, Z. We're going to do this, and that. Don't you want, it's really framing that structure like you did of they don't understand what leadership is, right? You kind of ask them and it's like that blank face and they don't understand why they need this. So I think, again, like I said, it's like that handing them a poster like this, it's going to do nothing because they see a poster to go do an extracurricular, and those that kind of don't want to do anything are not going to, they're going to look at it and go away, kind of thing. But I think continuing to have those conversations that it seems that you are having with parents, with students, I think it's definitely on the right track. And I think student government is so important, and leadership is so important, and I think it's going to attract the right kids at the right time. It's just sometimes it's a marathon to get there, to get all of that high school attendance. But
Yes, great. Cheryl, I'll just add a little bit to that. I think at the start of today's session, we heard from the youth that no one's listening to us. So you've taken the step that you've heard what they've asked for, and now you're looking at how to make that connection. Take the pressure off yourself. You don't got to be the expert. Continue to go back to the youth and ask them, is this what you're talking about? So I think what you've already done is actionable and is creating that leadership in some of the young folks who will take that initiative to follow up with you and follow through with some of the parents. So I just want to congratulate you on listening to the young people and then looking out for a way for them to find their voice. Excellent. Excellent. Anyone else? No?
I just love what you're doing. It so aligns with the work that I'm doing as well. And I just wanted to offer um, our magazine as a platform that others could help facilitate what's co-created with the youth that they're with, as a platform to help amplify their creation. So whether it's poetry or writing or artwork or photography, I can put the link in the chat, but it's Motivos. It's bilingual, it's English and Spanish, and the students can get their work published and amplified. We're based in Philadelphia, but we're national. So, like you had said before, like, why are we doing this? Well, this isn't homework. This is to share your voice with the world. This is to shape, the narrative of what's going on, and to have adults read what you're writing in a formal way, and there's no like direct what do you is that they can't be shy because they're not speaking right in front of someone necessarily. So if you have a shy person who likes to write, this could be the perfect platform. Yeah, thank you so much for your work. It's wonderful. I love the energy. You're re-inspiring me. So thank you.
no, thank you. That sounds so amazing. My jaw dropped. So yes, please, if you would love to share that, I would love to get in contact with you and look at it. That looks amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else before we close out here in the next minute? Okay, you'll see in the chat the slide deck, the link to the slide deck. We'll also follow up and include that in the thank you for attending email to you all here today. I do want to bring up our May 6th, or bring to attention our May 6th After School Action Day at the State Capitol. So we will have youth in action on that day, speaking and giving testimony of why after school and summer programs matter to them and their communities. And again, I'm dropping in the Mott Youth Pitch Challenge. You heard some great ideas today on how to just get your kids engaged with them creating their own questions. And in here for this opportunity, being able to identify a problem that they care about. And then lastly, the session evaluation. Ask that you take just a couple of minutes to complete that to help guide our future sessions moving forward. All right. Well, thank you all. Really appreciate you on today. Look forward to seeing you next month's session. And if you haven't registered yet for Advocacy Day, please do so. We look forward to seeing you in person. Thank you again, Kaylee. Excellent presentation. Really appreciate you and Penn Education for your time.
Yes, of course. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Reach out, please, at any point. I'd love to chat.
All right, great.
Thank
Have a great
you.
day, everybody.